So housing alternatives, this is a complicated world. We have used both public and private efforts here. Um, we also use public efforts to support the private market. And so when we start talking about them here, the first one is to just build more housing, expand public housing, create more housing units that are managed by government, that are subsidized by government. There are people in our society that are going to need these. Frail elderly people who are living on fixed incomes, people with developmentally and disabilities and other forms of disabilities, people who have very low levels of education and skill level. We're going to need to have subsidized housing. And so we can decide to do it in public housing, which the government owns, or we can decide to do it in private housing, which private developers own, but a government voucher is subsidizing the rent. And so we are using both of those means, but we are using them in relatively small scale. And so the housing problem is growing faster than the expansion of this. And there are times when public housing and public expenditure in housing becomes unpopular and it gets cut back in the federal budget. And so we go through periods of expansion and periods of withdrawal. So another way of doing this, which is to create housing tax credits, zoning exceptions to encourage people to build buildings that include lower income apartments. And this is typically what is called affordable housing. You allow a landlord to build more building on a lot. They build it higher or they build it denser. And the exchange is that in those extra apartments, they have to create rental units that are related to the median income. They can be slightly above the median income, slightly below the median income, significantly below the median income. This is the definition of affordable housing. So you'll often hear affordable for who, and well, if that's the question, of course, which part of the median income was this set of affordable housing designed for? People at 60% of the median income, people at 30% of the median income, people at 20% of the median income. And so that makes it a central debate. But since we have the capacity to change zoning and to change the kind of building that's built in a lot, then we can expect that to get those changes, you build apartments that are in the social good. And so then we can create affordable housing by directly subsidizing landlords or by using tax abatement and tax exemptions to help reduce the cost of the building so that the landlord receives tax exemptions and tax abatements which allow them to bring down the overall cost. And the expectation is as part of that, they will build units that fall in this category of affordability. So the underlying issue in most cities of housing is the value of the land. As we become denser, as more people desire to live in cities, as our population grows, there's more competition for the use of the land, and the land values therefore rise. Since land values rise, people gamble on future land values, and so they bid up the price of the land values really beyond their present use, expecting them to continue to rise in the future. And so that means that properties that would have been worth $200,000 suddenly become worth $800,000, not because the building has changed, but because the land value has changed. And this means that the rental value, the cost of living in the unit, rises enormously. So in many parts of the world, there's public ownership of land, and land is held together in trusts so that there's not this speculation in land value. And the developer, the people who are building the houses, rent the land for a particular length of time, 50 years or 100 years, and build the building. And then what is on the market is the value of the building and not the value of the land. And so this is one plan that people are talking about. And then there is the idea of extending rent controls, of setting limits on what are the rental values that a landlord can take. The problem with rent controls, again, is that it arbitrarily sets prices. The prices may even get below the cost of operating the facility. They certainly will get below the cost of other uses of the money that the investor has in it. And so they tend to cause underinvestment in housing, and it's one of the reasons we haven't used this. Now, this little brief introduction to housing, I hope whets your appetite and will send you to think more about housing policy.